Bright Duty. Every student matters.
After Umar's assassination came the next caliph, and his name was Usman. Okay, during his reign, the grievances which had stifled under Umar's heavy-handed rule rose to surface. So the kind of grievances that were already now surfacing, okay, during the rule of Umar, it existed even during the reign of Usman. Okay, now one of the members of the opposition, so there were oppositions who were opposing the caliphs. So one of the members of the opposition was Ali Abi Talib, and he would in future become the fourth caliph, okay, after Usman's death. But he was also one of the persons who opposed the caliph during this time, during the reign of Usman. It was in fact Usman's continuation of Umar's policy of favoritism and state unity which generated complaints. Now Usman continued with the policy of how Caliph Umar favored only his relatives, favored only the favorite people, okay, the people that he liked, into recruiting them or putting them in a position of power in offices. Okay, so that was followed by Caliph Usman as well. So this was not liked by the people. And hence people like Ali Abi Talib, they rose in opposition against the Caliph. All right. Usman attempted to retain the unity of the kingdom by appointing members of his own clan. So just like I said, Usman also, like Umar, appointed certain officers from his own clan. Okay, and these were put to the offices of governor. Okay, governors were appointed from his own clan. Okay, so these were Umayyads, and they were appointed to be the governors. Now the territory of the governor Muawiya was enlarged to include the whole of Syria and northern Iraq. So the governorship of Muawiya, one of the appointed governors, under his control, it was the area of the whole of Syria as well as northern Iraq, which was given to be controlled or governed by Muawiya, by the Caliph. Okay, Usman's enemies charged him of nepotism. So because of this reason, he was charged of nepotism. The people started to now revolt or speak against the Caliph, saying that he only favored his relatives, his family members, and his favorite people in the court, okay, or in the empire. Usman tried to increase the income for the diwan or pensioners by continuing to push the borders of the empire further north and east. So Usman continued to expand the territories and conquer areas that lied towards the north and eastern part of the Arab Empire, and by expansion to new territories, by conquering new territories, the money or the revenue that he collected, that was used to increase the income of the pensioners, okay, the compensation provided to the pensioners. But the booty obtained from the wars was not enough to maintain the diwan. But despite all these areas that were conquered, despite all the wealth, all the booty that was collected, accumulated as new areas were conquered, that did not seem enough to pay the pensioners. All right. Now, to add to this increasing burden on the government, burden on the caliph to pay the pensioners, the number of soldiers were also increasing. The number of governors were also increasing. All right. So because now the caliph had to pay the governors, the caliph had to pay his administrators, what he did, he decreased the salary of the soldiers to ensure that the salaries of the governors continued. Okay, so this happened. Obviously this created discontent among the people, so there were more people who rose against him, there were more people who revolted against him. Okay, and Usman was also accused of religious innovations. Usman was also said to be interpreting the Quran in his own ways. Okay, not following how the Quran is, but he was trying to innovate the religion in his own ways. Okay, he authorized an official version of Quran, the Quran that he innovated. Okay, that version he authorized, and all other copies of the Quran were burnt. So he made his interpretation of Quran the official Quran. So now this also caused discontent. This also made the people angry. All right. So this led, okay, this led to the fall of the Khalifa, whose name was Usman. Okay, so this discontent, this kind of policies followed by Usman led to his downfall. Now, so in 656, Usman was murdered by the discontented Egyptians. Okay, the members of the Arab Empire from Egypt who were angry with Usman. All right. So after Usman, the Caliph that came to rule the Arab Empire was Ali Abi Talib. Okay, so he became the next Caliph. His failure to punish the assassins of Usman quickly led to an uprising. Now, after Ali Abi Talib came to be the Caliph, he did not punish the assassins of Usman, the preceding Caliph. Okay. So as a result of that, there was chaos, there was discontent among the people. All right. So a civil war, a war within the empire among different groups against different groups within the empire that took place. So such civil wars broke out under the leadership of Talha and Zubair, two of Ali's former supporters, and Aisha, the former wife of Prophet Muhammad and daughter of Abu Bakr. So there were groups such as the group led by Aisha, who was the former wife of Prophet Muhammad and also daughter of Abu Bakr, and there was also another group which was led by Talha and Zubair, who initially supported Ali Abi Talib, the Caliph. Okay, but now these groups, they came together, they formed groups with the people who supported them, and they started to rise in uprising against the Caliph. Okay, this rebellion, the revolt, the civil war was suppressed near Basra. Okay, so this rebellion was suppressed near Basra, which is in Iraq, at the famous Battle of Camel. It is called the Battle of Camel because Aisha, the former wife of Prophet Muhammad, watched the battle from his palanquin, which was set on a camel. Okay, because of that reason, the battle is called the Battle of Camel. So in this battle, the uprising was suppressed by Ali Abi Talib. All right. Now, as this happened, there were also other disgruntled people, other people who were unhappy with Ali's authority. They also challenged Ali. They also challenged the Caliph. They also protested against him. Okay. In Syria, its governor Muawiya refused to submit to Ali. Now he refused to submit to the authority, to the rule of Ali. Okay. So these two, Muawiya and Ali, they confronted each other at Safin in early 657 AD, where Muawiya called for arbitration. Okay. Now, this confrontation was very important because the Syrians, okay, the people of Syria, they accepted Muawiya as Caliph, as the new leader of the Arab Empire. And Muawiya took control of Egypt later that year. The governor of Syria was able to also take control of Egypt. Okay. Now, Muawiya was later responsible for the foundation of Umayyad dynasty of the rulers of Arab Empire. Okay. Now his clan resisted Prophet Muhammad. Okay. Now Ali, who was the then caliph, okay, of the Arab Empire, in 658 AD, he was murdered by the Karl, Khaljids, okay. By this time, Ali's rule had been confined to central and southern Iraq. By this time, Ali's rule were confined to just central and southern Iraq. So we know that in Syria and in Egypt, Muawiya had already taken control. In 661 AD, Ali, the Caliph of the Arab Empire, was murdered by Khaljit. Okay. Now Muawiya became the Caliph. He was earlier the governor of Syria who had taken control of Egypt. Okay. Now he became the Caliph of the entire empire, Arab Empire. Okay. And he, with his rule, began the Umayyad rule. Okay. Umayyad dynasty. All right. Now the Umayyads, the rulers of this dynasty, they idealized the first four caliphs, the caliphs such as Bakr, Umar, Usman and Ali, and they called them the righteous caliphs, the good caliphs. Okay. They are considered to be the only caliphs who preserved the true tradition of Muhammad. So these caliphs were considered to be only those caliphs who preserved the true tradition of Prophet Muhammad. Okay. Now let us look at Muawiya and his successors. Now Muawiya brought great change in the status of Khalifa or Caliph, the ruler of the empire. He declared that he was the first king of Islam and commander of the faithfuls. So he declared himself the king as well as the commander. Okay, he changed the seat of power from Medina to Damascus. So the seat of power was in Medina earlier before Muawiya. Now Muawiya moved the capital city from Medina to Damascus. Under the leadership of Muawiya and his successors, Muslims conquered North Africa, areas in North Africa like Tunis and Morocco, and they also spread Islam there. Okay, then they crossed the Strait of Gibraltar and entered Spain. Okay, in 711 AD they defeated Roderick, the last Visigoth king, and advanced to Pyrenees mountains and onto France. Okay, and moved into France. They were, however, defeated. The troops of Muawiya and his successors were defeated by Charles Martel at Tours in 732 AD in France. This battle is described as one of the major or important battles that were fought in Western Europe. Okay, but it is doubtful that the Muslims, even successful, could have advanced much further in a region far away from their home base. All right, so they extended up to France, but they could not conquer France. All right, they moved that far. They went, captured Northern Africa, moved to Spain, and from Spain they moved to France, but they could not conquer it. All right. Now, if you look to the east, if you look to the eastern side of Europe, in 1712 AD, they conquered in eastern side of the Arab Empire. In 1712 AD, they conquered the province of Sindh in India, but they could not go any further than that. They could not enter the Indian subcontinent. Again, in 751 AD, they defeated the Chinese at Talas in Central Asia, but again, they did not or could not advance further towards China. So those became, Sindh and Talas in Central Asia, Pyrenees, they marked the limits of the Muslim empire. Okay, those were the limits, those were the borders of the Muslim empire. All right. However, the Arabs, they failed to take Constantinople, the capital of Byzantine Empire, after a full years of siege in 1717 to 1880. Despite a full year of constant invasion, they could not take control or siege Constantinople. Okay, despite some setbacks, the fact remains that what had started out as a simple desert region had grown over a century into a great Eurasian empire. By 750 AD, Islam ruled over vast territories stretching from Pyrenees in Europe, Sindh in India, and from Morocco to frontiers of China. So, despite the setback they received in Constantinople, the fact remains that the Muslim empire extended and expanded to such an extent that it stretched from Spain in the west to Talas in China, in Central Asia in east. Okay, and with the stretch of its extent, with the stretch of its territory, it also spread Islam in these areas. All right. Now the Umayyads, they were essentially Arabic in their outlook. They were Arabic. Okay. Their governors and generals were Arabs. So all the governors and generals appointed to that position were all Arabs. Okay. They built, of course, we have already understood, a very big Islamic empire. Okay. But in the second quarter of the 8th century, by the second quarter, that means between 730 to between 725 to 750, the power of the Umayyad dynasty declined. Okay, the Umayyad Caliph was defeated and killed by Abu Muslims in 750 AD. So the Umayyads were replaced by another dynasty which was called the Abbasids. Okay. So now let's look at Abbasids. Now the Abbasids came to power on account of Shiite movement. So there were two factions within the Islamic community. One was Sunni and one was Shia. Now the Abbasids, they came to power on account of the Shiite movement. Okay, and they transferred their loyalty to Muhammad bin Ali. Alright, the great grandson of Muhammad, Prophet Muhammad's uncle Abbas. Alright. Intensive propaganda began around 718 AD in Iraq and Khorasan. Muhammad bin Ali was succeeded by his son Ibrahim. Okay, so Muhammad bin Ali ruled over Iraq and Khorasan, and during that time there was a propaganda to kill Muhammad bin Ali. All right. Now Muhammad bin Ali was succeeded by his son Ibrahim. He decided to concentrate his efforts on Khorasan in 745 AD. He sent Abu Salim as his personal representatives to Khorasan. Abu Salim was able to create a solid base of support for himself. He died in 748 AD. After his capture by Umayyads, but the Abbasid forces continued their advance towards west. In 749 AD, they reached Iraq and declared Ibrahim's brother Abu al-Abbas to be the new caliph with his title al-Shafa. The last Umayyad caliph was killed in 750 AD. So the Abbasids, they were moving from west to the east. Okay, slowly towards Khorasan. So initially they started to get support from the others. So Abu Salim was sent by Ibrahim, okay, who was son of Muhammad bin Ali, to Khorasan to get some support for them. Okay. Now they continued their campaigns, and finally in 749 they reached Iraq and declared Ibrahim's brother Abu al-Abbas as the new caliph, okay, as the new ruler of the Muslim empire and as the new Abbasid caliph. Okay. Now, it was during the rule of the Caliph al-Mansur that changed that changes brought by the Abbasid revolution were visible. The Arabs quickly lost the political and social superiority that they had retained under the Umayyads. Now, changes were brought by Abbasids. Okay, so earlier the governors, the administrators were Arabs. They were there were Arab element present in the government bodies. Now that was replaced, that was changed by Al Mansur, who was from the Abbasid dynasty. Okay. Now, political prestige was increasingly determined by one's standing with Caliph. The seat of power was transferred from Syria to Iraq. Now, the seat of power was transferred from Syria to Iraq with the capital city of Baghdad. So, Baghdad became the capital city. Administration was placed in the hands of Persian Barmak family. Now, the Persians became administrators. Okay, Al-Mansur renounced the Shiite origins of the movement. The Abbasids quickly became the champions of the Sunni orthodoxy, a policy which helped them to unify an increasingly cosmopolitan empire. They adopted Sunni orthodox practices. Okay, under Al-Mansur's son Al-Mahdi, Sassanid Persian models of court, etiquettes, and government were introduced into the Abbasid style of rulership. Now, during the Umayyads, it was Arabic style, but in the Abbasids, it was more Persian style, and Persian etiquettes were adopted in the court of the ruler of the Muslim empire. All right. Now, the next caliph who came to rule the vast Muslim empire was Harun. Okay, now he became the caliph or the ruler when he was in his early 20s. All right, he began his reign by appointing very able ministers who carried on the work of government so that they greatly improved the condition of the people. So he began his rule by appointing very able, only those ministers, only those officers who were able to provide certain services, okay, who were educated, who were skilled, okay, and with their work they could improve the condition of the people in the empire. Okay. Now, it was under the rule of Harun that Baghdad became a splendid city, one of the most beautiful, one of the most flourishing city. Okay, Harun Rashid was paid tribute by many rulers. Okay, and the tributes that these rulers paid, these money went on to the development, went on to build buildings, to promote art and architecture, and also for the luxurious life of the ruler, of the court members at the court as well as in the capital city. Okay. Harun built a very magnificent palace at Baghdad. It was more beautiful than any of the caliph before him. So no one had ever built such a magnificent and beautiful palace. Okay. He established his court there in Baghdad and lived in a great pomp and show. He lived luxuriously and he showcased that luxurious lifestyle. Okay, and his court was attended by hundreds of courtiers and slaves. There were hundreds of courtiers, entertainers that were employed in the court. Later in his life, he moved and set up his court at Raqqa, a city in north of Syria. He did this to hold disloyal Syria in check. Okay, so later he also set up a court in Raqqa in northern part of Syria, so that all the disgruntled people, Syrians there, could be checked, could be prevented. Okay. And after he moved the court to Raqqa, he never resided at Baghdad. Okay, he resided at Raqqa. Now, Harun was very anxious about his rule, about the people that he ruled. Okay, he wanted the people to be justly treated by the government officials. He wanted people to be treated properly by his officials, by his ministers. So he would always want to find out if things were all right outside of the palace, if the people were suffering or not, if the people were given proper treatment by the officials or not. Okay. So in order to know this, he disguised, he looked like he was not a ruler. So because of his anxiety and the need to know if the people were treated properly by his officials, he sometimes disguised himself. Okay, he dressed to look like a poor man or somebody who was a local minister or local officer, etc. And he would go at night into the cities, into the villages, and walk through the streets and bazaars, listening to people talk, okay, and also asking them questions so that they know if they were treated properly, so that they know that how their lives were. Okay, so in this way he tried to learn about his subjects and whether they were happy, contented or not. All right. Now Caliph Harun was also a lover of art and learning. He was also a scholar, okay, and a good poet. Alright, so he was quite creative and he was quite learned. So when he heard of learned men from his kingdom or in his own or from his neighboring countries, from his neighbors, okay, he invited them to his court and honored them. All right. Therefore, he became very popular not only in Europe, not only in Central Asia, but the entire world. Okay. So because of this reason, he had diplomatic relations. He had good relations with China, with Charlemagne, the king of the Franks, and the Holy Roman Emperor. All right, so so you see that how he had developed relationships with people, with rulers from other countries and other parts of the world. Now, Caliph Harun presented silks, some very precious and expensive gifts like silks, brass, candelabra, perfumes, slaves, ivory, chessmen, a colossal tent with many colored curtains, and a water clock to the ruler, to the Roman Emperor Charlemagne. Okay. The presents that he provided, they were unprecedented. They were some of the articles that were not so commonly found in the market around the world. Okay, so this I signified how he respected the relationships with the other rulers. All right. Now, apart from being a lover of art and architecture, he was also a great military leader. Okay, he was an excellent soldier and he showed his ability at a very young age. Okay, when his father was the caliph, was the ruler. Okay. He commanded an army of 85,000 Arabs and Persians and was sent by his father to invade the Eastern Roman Empire, which was then ruled by Empress Irene. Now, after defeating Irene's troops, okay, he marched his armies to Scutari on the Asiatic coast opposite to Constantinople. Okay. Now the empress realized that the city would certainly be taken over by the Muslims. So therefore she sent some of her officials, okay, ambassadors, to arrange for terms how Constantinople or the Eastern Roman Empire could be taken over by Harun. All right. But Harun refused to agree to anything except immediate surrender. But Harun said that he would not accept to any terms but immediate surrender. Okay. Now it is reported that on one of the ambassadors, said the empress had heard so much of your ability as a general. Though you are her enemy, she admires you as a soldier. So the empress, despite despite knowing that she was going to surrender, going to have to surrender herself to the enemy Harun. She sent a short message to Harun, okay, and that message said that how she admired him as a soldier despite him being her enemy. Now with this message, Harun was very impressed. Harun was very impressed, and he replied by saying that he would spare Constantinople if she paid 70,000 pieces of gold as yearly tribute, as yearly fee. Okay. Now with this, the empress agreed to these terms. Okay, the empress agreed to pay 70,000 pieces of gold every year. Okay, and in return she could keep the Eastern Roman Empire. Alright, she paid this first years of tribute, and soon Harun's army set out to his homeland. Okay, the tribute of the gold that Empress Irene agreed to pay to Harun was sent regularly for many years. So this tribute continued to be paid to the Muslim Empire regularly. Okay. Now, in 802 AD, Nicephorus captured the throne of Eastern Roman Empire. So after Empress Irene, Nicephorus came to rule the Eastern Roman Empire. Now, after he came to be the ruler, he sent ambassadors to Harun's court and told him that the tribute which Empress Irene paid, that tribute would no longer be paid. Now, when this message came, Harun started with his army to punish the Emperor Nicephorus. Okay, as soon as he reached the Roman territory, he ravaged the country and took possession of everything that was valuable. Okay, so as soon as Harun and his troop reached the Roman Empire, they destroyed everything and took possession of everything that they could lay their hands on. Okay, they laid siege to Heraclea, a city on the shores of Black Sea. So the city of Heraclea was also taken. Was captured. Nicephorus was now forced to agree to pay the tribute, which earlier he had disagreed to pay the tribute. Okay, now he had to pay the tribute. However, when again Harun went back to the capital city, the Emperor Nicephorus again said that he would not pay the tribute. Okay, now Harun again took his troops and then reached the Roman province. Okay, Nicephorus marched against him with 125,000 men. So both the parties met to fight with each other. In the battle which followed, the emperor was wounded and 40,000 of his men were killed. So the Roman emperor was wounded and 40,000 of his troops were killed. After the battle, Nicephorus again promised to pay the tribute, but again he failed to keep that promise. Harun now was very angry, alright, and he promised to kill the emperor if he should ever lay hands upon him. So now he was very frustrated and angry at the emperor, and he vowed to kill him. But as he was getting ready to march more into the Roman provinces, a revolt broke out in one of the cities in his empire. When he was on his way to suppress that revolt, he died of an illness which had been giving him trouble for a long time. So he came back, instead of killing Nicephorus, he came back to suppress or stop that rebellion. But while he was coming back, he fell sick, and it was a sickness which had been troubling him, causing him a lot of trouble for a long time, and he died of that illness. Okay. Now, the reign of Harun Rashid is regarded as the apex or the most flourishing, or the most flourished, or most prosper, or the most prospered reign during the Arab Empire. Okay, in the Arab Empire during the Muslim period, during this period. All right. So the reign of Harun Rashid is widely regarded as the apex of Abbasid power and achievements. But it was during his reign that the signs of its weakness became visible. Now, on one hand, it reached its top. Okay, the Abbasid Empire or the Abbasid power reached its top, but at the same time, on the other hand, its weaknesses or signs of weaknesses also became quite visible. Okay. And what were these weaknesses? Revolts broke out everywhere. Okay, so revolts broke out in Persia. All right. The Abbasids also had their hold on eastern Morocco and Tunisia. To the north, the state was on the defense against the Byzantines in Syria and Antonia, and against the Khazars in Armenia. So weaknesses within the caliphate also came to the surface. So the weaknesses within the court, within the palace was also increasing. Okay, the factions between the different ministers, between the different governors, that also resurfaced. Okay, they had to deal with revolts in Persia, in eastern Morocco and Tunisia, in Syria, in Antonia, in Armenia as well. Okay. The Burma kids were disgraced and thrown out of office. Okay, some of the office holders in the court, they were thrown out, and thus removing a royal family of competent administrators. Okay, so a group of administrators were removed as a result of these weaknesses that were resurfacing due to the conflicts, due to the factions created within the government. All right, within the court. Now, after the death of Harun, another civil war broke out between his two sons. Okay, the two sons began to fight with each other for succession. Okay, so these two sons were Al-Amin, who was based in Iraq, and Al-Mamun, who was based in Persia. Okay, so as a result of this civil war, Al-Amin died. Okay. The civil war ended with Al-Amin's death in 1813 AD. Okay, in 813 AD. So Al-Mamun became victorious. Okay. The founding of the Tahirid dynasty in 820 AD in Khorasan by Al-Mamun's Persian general Tahir inspired others with similar aspirations, although this dynasty and the one that followed it recognized the suzerainty of the Abbasids. They effectively eroded Abbasid authority in Persia. Now, with the coming of Al-Mamun as the Caliph of the Muslim or the Arab Empire, his general Tahir was provided, or was encouraged. Okay, encouraged to form Tahirid dynasty in Khorasan in 820 AD. So by seeing how Tahir, one of Al-Mamun's general, founded a dynasty in 820 AD in Khorasan, it gave examples, or it acted as an examples for others to follow. Okay. Now, it was not only in Khorasan that the authority of the Caliph was weakening. Okay, even in Iraq, the Abbasid authority was fading. It was already weakening. Okay, followed by a large size of bureaucracy and fall in revenues. There was fall of revenues, and also the bureaucracy, the size of the bureaucracy or the government or the ministers or the officials, they were also decreasing. Okay, the caliphs tried to solve this financial problem by granting tax farms to governors and military commanders, thus decentralizing and reducing Abbasid authority. Now, the government, seeing how it was weakening, okay, how its administration was weakening and how the bureaucracy was falling apart, it now began to realize, or began to think, that the only way to solve this problem, this financial problem, was to give away some of the departments, okay, like the taxing of land to collection of, say for example, land tax to the governors and to military commanders. So they reduced the authority, the Abbasid rulers authority was reduced. Okay, they did not have control over all the departments, so they were decentralizing the departments and giving the supervision or control over certain departments to its governors and military commanders, so that they do not rise against the caliphs and rise against or lead to or cause the fall of the economy. All right. The Caliph Al-Mutasim, okay, another ruler, he imported during his reign Turkish slaves as soldiers. Okay, he imported slaves from another region to be employed as soldiers. But these Turkish slaves or soldiers, they quickly grew in power and they reduced the caliphate to puppet institutions. Now, the caliphate, the ruler of the Arab Empire, became a puppet. Okay, they danced according to the wishes of the Turkish slaves who were now soldiers. Okay. In 836 AD, Al-Mutasim transferred the seat of caliphate to Samarra. His actions indicate the gulf between the caliph and his subjects. The caliphate remained in Samarra until 892 AD when Al-Mutamid returned to Baghdad. Okay, so because of the rising factions within the government, within the ministers, within the officials, the caliph had to move from its capital to another capital. Okay, so Al-Mutasim moved his seat of power to Samarra. Okay, again, his successor, when Al-Mutamid came to become the caliph, he moved back to Baghdad, okay, as the capital of the empire. In 847 AD, Al-Mutakil became the caliph. Okay, he made serious attempt to reinstate Abbasid power, which was already weakening and declining. Okay, he attempted to break the power of the Turkish military, which had become so strong. Okay, and also which was challenging the caliph. But he was murdered in 862 AD. All right, and after his murder, anarchy followed. There was a lot of disruptions within the empire, okay, for succession to power. And after Al-Mutakil came Al-Mutamid, okay, in 870 AD. Al-Mutamid was an incapable ruler, but his brother Al-Muwaffaq became the real power behind the throne and made much efforts to re-establish Abbasid power. Okay, so Al-Mutamid, who succeeded Al-Mutakil, he was not a good ruler. He was incapable of bringing back the empire to its earlier glory, okay, or making an effort towards it. But his brother, who succeeded Al-Mutamid, Al-Muwaffaq, he tried real hard, or he made real effort to re-establish Abbasid power, okay. In southern Iraq, black African slaves known as Zands started a rebellion by 870 AD, and they reached close to Baghdad, okay, to challenge the caliph. Al-Muwaffaq gradually pushed these rebellious African slaves south and succeeded in crushing the rebellion in 883 AD. All right, so this rebellion of Jans was successfully brought down, okay, or crushed. Meanwhile, Al-Muwaffaq also checked the power of Persian Tahirid. So the Tahirid, the general, right, we know that he had founded his own dynasty and had become quite powerful. Alright, so Al-Muwaffaq also checked the power of this Persian Tahirid. And there was also other dynasty called Safarid dynasty. So all the powers of these small dynasties were also checked by the Caliph. Okay. His successful assertion of Caliph's power continued under his brother's two successors. So until the next two successions, the Abbasids' power were able to able to remain intact and strong. Okay. Now Muqtadir succeeded and became the next caliph. And when he became the caliph, he was only a boy of 13 years old. Okay. Now, caliphate, despite all these attempts, again began to decline. Carmine revolts disrupted trade and communications in Syria, southern Arabia, and Bahrain, while in the west, the Fatimid anti-caliphates was established in Tunisia and quickly began to encroach upon Abbasid territory in Egypt. So the caliphate or the rule of the Abbasid was declining again. There were revolts and uprising that was increasingly appearing throughout the empire. Okay, so such revolts appeared in Syria, southern Arabia, and Bahrain, and similar uprisings and revolts also took place in Tunisia, and that quickly spread to Egypt as well. Okay. Meanwhile, the Bedouin Hamdanin dynasty was established in Syria and northern Iraq. Okay, the Shiite Buyid dynasty came into power in western Persia. So all these dynasties were coming into power. They were emerging as powerful dynasties. Okay, so in Syria and northern Iraq was Bedouin Hamdanin dynasty, and in western Persia was the Buyid dynasty. Okay. The completion of the decline of the Abbasid authority is symbolized by the grant of the title Commander of Commanders to the governor of Iraq, although probably intended to assert the superiority of military commander of Baghdad over other commanders. This title effectively recognized the existence of temporal authority, which left Caliph only a formal head of state and representative of Muslim authority. So as you can see, by this time, there was a rise of different dynasties all across the empire. Now, alongside this, what was happening was Caliph's power and position was reduced. Now, it decreased to being just a formal head, just a ruler just a namesake ruler. Okay, but the powerful ones, the more the people who were in power and authority, those were the governors, those were the military commanders. Okay, so they were actually powerful people in the empire, and the caliph who was the actual ruler, he became just a formal head, all right, and representative of the Muslim authority. In 945 AD, the Buyid Muiz al-Dawla entered Baghdad, and the title Commander of Commanders and the control of Abbasid seat of power passed into the hands of Shiite dynasty. So finally, the power of Abbasid dynasty was taken by Muiz al-Dawla of Buyid dynasty, who became the commander of commanders and took control of the Abbasid seat of power in Baghdad. Okay, so with that came the downfall of the Arab Empire. All right. Now, from the 9th century, the Abbasid state became very weaker. So we already saw that how the Abbasid dynasty became weaker. Okay, its capital was at Baghdad, and the caliph resided there. The caliph had become purely a formal institution. It was just a formal institution. It could not execute and exercise power and authority like it used to before. Okay, the control of Baghdad over distant provinces had also declined. Now Baghdad, or the caliph who resided in Baghdad, could not have proper control over its provinces, which were located in distant areas. As a result of this, as a result of how the caliph was becoming weak, conflict and revolt arose between pro-Arab Iranian and pro-Iranian factions and the bureaucracy. So as a result of the weak caliph and caliphate, there were factions between the pro-Arab and pro-Iranian ministers at the court. Okay. In 1810, a civil war broke out between the supporters of Amin and Mamun, sons of Caliph Harun Rashid. Okay, so the faction was divided between the supporters of Amin and supporters of Mamun. Okay, now this deepened the already existing factions, already existing divisions between the people at the court. Okay. Now this created a new power block of Turkish slave officers known as Mamluk. Okay, now this also created a new power because of these factions. The Turkish slave officers or the Mamluk took advantage of it, and now they created a powerful group of people. Okay, Shiism once again competed with Sunni orthodoxy for power. So as there were factions created, on the basis of the different sect of Islam as well, Shia versus Sunni. Okay. A number of new dynasties as a result of that arose, okay, such as Tahirids, Samanids in Khurasan and Transoxania, okay, and Tulunids in Egypt and Syria. So, like we saw, many dynasties began to appear and emerge, okay, in different parts of the empire. And as you can see, Tahirids and Samanids in Khurasan and Transoxiana, okay, and Tulinid Tulinid dynasty in Egypt and Syria. Okay, so as a result of the emergence of these powerful smaller dynasties, the power of the caliph, the Abbasid dynasty, it was limited just to central Iraq and western Iran. Okay, and this also was lost finally in 945 AD. Okay. When Buyids Shiite clan from the Caspian region of Iran captured Baghdad, the Buyid rulers assumed various titles. So the Buyids were the ones who took power, who seized the power of Abbasid and became the ruler of Baghdad or the empire. Okay, so as they became the ruler, the ruler of the Arab empire, they took various titles to call themselves. Okay, such as Shahanshah. Okay, so Shahanshah meant king of kings. Okay, so they did not use the title of Caliph. Okay, which until the Abbasids, the rulers used. Okay, but now the Buyids used titles such as Shahanshah, and they kept the Abbasid Caliph as the symbolic head of their Sunni subjects. So Abbasid Caliph continued to become the ruler or the head of the Sunni subjects, but in reality, the head of the entire empire, now the seat of power, the authority and power was now taken by Shahanshah from the Buyid dynasty. Okay. The decision not to abolish the caliphate was a shrewd one because another Shiite dynasty, the Fahmids, had emerged in North Africa and conquered Egypt in 969. The Fahmids followed Shiism and claimed to be descended from the Prophet Muhammad's daughter, hence the sole rightful rulers of Islam. Now, the decision to not get rid of a caliph and the head of the Shia dynasty was made because there were emergence of other dynasties in North Africa. okay, in North Africa, which claimed to be also a Shiite dynasties, okay. So if such dynasties were removed completely, then there would have been another rebellion and revolt, all right. So because of this reason, the caliphate was also not abolished. During the period of 950 to 1200 AD, the Islamic society was held together not only by single political order or single language of culture, but by common economic and cultural patterns. So during this period, okay, during the period from 950 to 1200, okay, from 8th to 11th century, the culture, the language was the culture and language was quite diverse. There was no single language. There was no one style of culture which brought the people together. Okay, but what brought the people together was the common economic and cultural patterns, not language and religion. Okay. Now, a third ethnic group was added to the Arabs and Iranians, and we already know those were the Turkish military group who gained power over a period of time. Okay, so these were the Turkish sultanates, and they rose to power in the 10th and 11th centuries. All right. The Turks were nomadic tribes from the Central Asian steppes. Okay, the Turks were nomadic tribes. They were skilled riders and warriors, and they entered the Abbasid, Samanid, and Buyid administrations as slaves and soldiers. Okay, and over time, okay, they worked as slaves and soldiers, and gradually they rose to high positions of power on account of the military, on account of the loyalty to their rulers, to their masters, as well as their military capabilities and abilities. Okay. And so the Sultanate, the Turkish Sultanates also became a very important dynasty during this period. Okay, the Ghaznavid Sultanate was established by Alp Tagine and consolidated by his successor Mahmud of Ghazni. Okay, they had powerful army of Turks as well as Indians. Okay, their power was they were based in Khorasan and Afghanistan, and for them the Abbasid caliphs were not rivals but source of legitimacy. So for the Turkish sultanates, the Abbasids were not enemies. Okay, they were source from where they could get legitimacy. Okay, they could get support. All right, the Caliph was willing to support the Sunni Ghaznavid as a counterweight to Shiite power. So because the Caliph and the Turkish sultanates were not rivals, were not enemies, the Caliph supported the Turkish sultanate in effort to fight the Shiite power. Okay. The Saljuq, the Seljuk Turks entered Turan as soldiers in the armies of Samanids and Karakhanids, non-Muslim Turks. The Seljuk Turks established themselves as a powerful group under the leadership of two brothers, all right, and they were Tugril and Changri Beg. Now, taking advantage of the chaos after the death of Mahmud of Ghazni, all right, the Seljuks conquered Khorasan and made Nishapur their first capital. So, after the Turkish sultanates in Ghaznavid, all right, they were taken over by the Seljuk Turks, all right. And after they conquered Khorasan in Afghanistan, they made Nishapur their first capital. The Seljuk Turks next turned their attention to Western Persia and Iraq, which were ruled by Buyids. And in 1055 AD, they restored Baghdad to Sunni rule. So they were able to capture Baghdad, okay, and restore the Sunni rule. Caliph Al-Qaim conferred on Tughril Beg and took to the title of Sultan. So the Caliph legitimized the rule of Tughril Beg and gave him the title of Sultan. The two Seljuk brothers ruled together, but the Seljuk Sultanate broke up in the 12th century, but the Seljuk Sultanate also broke up. Okay, there was a power vacuum in Iraq as a result of this breakup, which enabled Caliph al-Nasir to make an attempt to restore Abbasid power. So when this breakup happened, okay, the Caliph took advantage again of this situation to restore Abbasid power. However, his successors were incompetent, and the last Caliph in Iraq, Al-Muttasim, was unable to offer any resistance to the Mongols when they arrived in Baghdad in 1258 AD. So although the Caliph al-Nasir made attempt to restore the power and authority of Abbasid power in Baghdad and the whole of empire, but his successors were not as capable as him. So as a result of the weak successors, they were unable to offer resistance or prevent the invasion and attack of the enemies, and one of the most dangerous threat or one of the most powerful enemies that they had to face was the Mongols. Okay, so the Mongols finally were able to be successful in their invasion and took over Baghdad in 1258 AD. The Abbasid line was re-established by the Mamluks in Egypt in 1261 AD. Although the caliphate was purely nominal, it served to legitimize the rule of secular dynasties. The last Abbasid caliph was deposed by Salim first, the Ottoman conqueror of Syria and Egypt, and thereafter the title of Caliph was held by the Ottoman sultans. Now, the Abbasids were able to re-establish their rule or re-establish their rule in Egypt by the Mamluks. Okay. Now, by this time, the Caliph was just a nominal head. Okay, it was just a namesake head, was not as powerful with authority to exercise over the people as it was in the earlier centuries. Okay. So the last caliph, okay, these caliphs were all getting weak and weak. As the succession happened. So the last Abbasid caliph was deposed, was removed finally by Salim I, who was the Ottoman ruler, okay, of Syria and Egypt. And thereafter this Ottoman ruler became the ruler of the Arab Empire. And as they became the ruler, they did not take the title of caliph. They called themselves Ottoman sultans. Okay, so with this, the Ottoman sultans came to power.